community, and so many other incredible things that we're going to share, hopefully, lots with you about today. And I'll read her official bio a little bit later, but right now I just want to offer you the warmest welcome, Abigail, and so much gratitude for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
So good to have you. So we met, I think it was 2009.
I think so, yeah, in a Thai yoga massage training.
Yes. And I remember
Hmm.
you talking about just these anatomical concepts at the time that just blew my mind. It was really a way that I had never heard anatomy spoken of before. There was so much depth and richness and connection with nature, and just it took away the mechanistic anatomical view that I had been so used to and brought it into a whole nother realm. And now I have your book and I get to read it to my classes all the time, and it's
I
such
love that.
treasure. I mean, such an incredible treasure. So, what was your inspiration for shifting the way that you think about the body and the world?
Mm. Oh, well, that all credit goes to my yoga teacher, somatic mentor, Patty Townsend, who created Embody Yoga. So in 2009, I would have been about 2 years into studying with her. So now it's been almost 20 years. And she is a many decade student of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who developed body mind centering. So that's my sort of somatic lineage. I joke with Patty that Bonnie's my somatic grandma and she's my somatic mom. And so someday I'll have a somatic baby. But it's but it's which is very different than like flesh and blood babies. But yeah, they really are my guiding mentors. And you can find a lot. They both have a lot online, but Bonnie's work, I think she started teaching body mind centering. It's got to be in like the 70s. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but it's been a lifelong. She's in her 80s now, and to watch her move is just, it's truly beautiful to watch her move and the way that she embodies the many layers and you know, and I'm taking a an online class with her now on embryology and the endocrine system, and the way that she can just embody these things and transmit it across time and space through online forums is spectacular. So I feel really fortunate that it was someone I was taking yoga classes at a studio around like near where I grew up. And after a few months, she was like, if you like my classes, you should go take a class with Patty down in Amherst, Massachusetts, so a little further away. And as soon the first class, I was just like, oh, this is something different. And so it's a style of being in the body where it's really not just a style, it's like a lifestyle of being in the body that is layered and deeply present and takes the anatomy and the physiology as philosophy. So what I see I've loved watching how somatics has become more of a thing. I used to have to describe to people what that was, and now it's just such a buzzword. I have a love-hate relationship maybe because I see it being used so often that it starts to lose some of its meaning. And I recognize that it's being used so often because there's this hunger for presence in the body and this sort of relational, um, yeah, this relational space that we get to be in that is so deeply embodied. But when I see some people sort of reaching for it, almost like imposing a philosophy onto the body or imposing these ideas onto the body. And what I really value and appreciate about what Bonnie has taught and then what Patty taught and now what I get to teach is that it's not about imposing anything on the body or making the body into any kind of way. It's really just about finding a deep listening and then learning the physiology and being enraptured by the way that our own bodies are and everything that we get to learn about them as science offers more and more, right? So yeah, so it's been I mean, I met Patty when I was, I think, 25, maybe 26, and I'm in my 40s now. So it feels like it's been a lifelong, I mean, it will be a lifelong um, relationship with not only with her, thankfully with her, but also
Mm,
with the work because it's just, I can't imagine my life oriented around anything else.
how beautiful.
Yeah, I feel really
I
fortunate.
I feel that way when I have long-term relationships with teachers, and I'm like the it's such a powerful thing that inspires so much gratitude.
Yeah,
Thank you for
especially
sharing
when you
that.
see some people had their teachers really really disappoint them. And
Yes.
so I feel really so fortunate that these two women are just like, they just are who they are. And I get to witness people in their fullest integrity teaching their life's work. It's really, I truly feel so fortunate.
Yes. Yes. It's brilliant. And I love how you've made it your own too. You know, there's your touches to it and your inspiration and your complexity. It was so beautiful to see your Instagram the other day where you were sharing about the spiralic
Yeah.
nature of bones and
Yeah.
water. And I love how you see those relationships between things. And then would you share a
Yeah.
little more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So, I should, I'll try and, my dog found a bone. She found a deer femur in the woods. And I took it from her to make the Instagram story. I need to see if she might have since buried it because she was just like, wait a second. But if I can find it, I'll pull it out and make a reel so that it's something more permanent. But basically, if, it doesn't have to be a deer femur. And I know that some people are vegans or vegetarians, so this might, gross you out a little bit. But for the meat eaters among us, the next time that maybe you make chicken, like chicken drumsticks or chicken drumsticks actually work really well for it. That long bone, if you look at it, if you touch it, you'll see that it spirals. And the deer femur was really pronounced. But our own femurs do this too. And a reason for that is that they actually are really incredibly fluid. The dry, compact bone that we think of when we think of a bone is about 20% water. But a living bone is filled with marrow. It has, blood and lymph, going through it and around it. And there's so much of a fluid body around this living bone that it's not just a dry, hard thing. There's water all the way through all of our tissues at all the time. And water on a rotating planet doesn't go straight down. It spins. That's why water forms droplets too, like rain. It's because it's spinning and the shape of the spin is making that raindrop. You can see it like when it goes down the drain, when it goes down the toilet bowl. It doesn't ever just go down, right? It spins. So water spinning is part of what gives shape to that form of we're fluid bodies. We have fluidity in us. So we're in a fluid relationship with gravity, meaning just like water, we don't go straight down. If we talk about what it feels to be rooted and grounded and anchored, these are all words that get said quite a lot. I say them a lot in my work. It's not just a straight up and down line. There's actually a spinning spiralic connection between body and earth all the time. It's not just a downward pull. There's also this push that goes up from the earth into our own bodies, and that also spirals. Everything in the body, if you're trying to get into the body and you're thinking of it like a collection of hard straight lines, you're going to get stuck in just the thinking of it, right? Whereas if you feel into it, there's going to be this sort of pulsing, spiraling, sort of Bonnie refers to it as like a sponging movement because it moves like a sea sponge. There's this dynamic fluidity to it that if you can feel that, now your embodiment and the mind that wants to think has something, real to explore, which is that there's this dynamic flow. So the bones spiral. And if you look out at any living, growing thing too, especially like I love those time lapse. Speaking of Instagram, like one of my favorite things to lose time into in Instagram are those time lapse plants, right? And you watch how they, like, if you're watching a plant move through the day, it's not just straight, it's like really kind of like moving and pulsing and spiraling. But if you watch plants grow, they grow with this spiral to them. And part of that is also how fluid needs to move through in a rotating planet with gravity as a spiraling force. We're going to have spirals everywhere. So that means I look out at the natural world and I see myself reflected back to me because I'm related to the natural world. I'm not so related. It's not as easy to see that in this, like right now, we're having this conversation on a computer, right angles everywhere. It's very hard and dry. There's magic in there, like we can find it. We're really talking to each other through like talking rocks, right? Do you listen to The Emerald by Joseph, or
Yes,
is it, what's his name? I forget his name, but The
I do
Emerald.
too. Oh,
So he's got
beautiful.
an episode where he talks about how like phones and computers are just talking rocks, right? There's no such thing as an object. So we can find the magic there, but I can see it. You can't see it, but I have plants all around me. I can see it so clearly in the reach of these plants for the sun. And
Mhm.
then I'm reminded that, like I guess we're just referencing Instagram a lot today because there's all those memes about how, like, a drink of water and some time in the sunshine makes us feel better. Like we're basically just
Yes.
talking daisies, right? So I can feel it and remember that I too have this spiraling reach to me, right? It's not just a mind activity now. I get to explore what it means to reach with this sort of, yeah, this organic spiral to me, which as I've healed from different injuries, like right now I'm getting over a pretty mild but painful shoulder injury. When I was writing Returning Home to Our Bodies, I actually had frozen shoulder for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And it was, which is, it's something, and I've learned that it affects women in their 40s and 50s quite
Yes.
a lot, right? I
Yes.
didn't know. And yeah, the being able to think of my body as not just and not only the spirals, but also all of the various different interconnected ways that my body is a whole ecosystem was so essential to all of the physical therapy, massage therapy that helped me, acupuncture, that thankfully I didn't have to get surgery, that allowed my shoulders to heal. It's this way of living and moving in the body it's a healing movement, right? Not just our own individual bodies, but I think also collectively, this is how we heal together.
I love that, Abigail. I love that that's like a center of your work. I know I've been to the anchor community quite a few times, and
Yeah.
it's so beautiful, and it's such a gift to see that how you have this skillfulness of emphasizing the body's role in challenging times and in, the architecture of white supremacy and capitalism and how that might inhibit our bodies or the expression of our bodies. And
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, that has been really where the Bonnie and Patty weren't teaching on the social layers of it so explicitly. They both talk about it. Well, Patty talks about it maybe more than Bonnie does. It's not that it's not talked about, but it's not a focus of their work as it is in mine. But when I was in my 20s and studying with Patty and then with Bonnie, um, it just I couldn't help but notice how these patterns of movement that we were naming and then rejecting, which is different than naming and then, we weren't getting so focused on saying like, look how they're wrong, look how they're wrong, look how they're wrong. We did a little bit of it, but for the most part, it was just like, look at this. Now try this. This doesn't feel good. This feels hard, tight. You feel like you're kind of like having to force. I was just in a class with Patty, I guess it was yesterday, where we were exploring what it felt like to push the heart forward in that opening the heart way that a lot of yoga classes do, right? There's a hardness there, there's a striving, there's an external relationship with my own body. Does it look right? Do I look like I'm doing this? I'm doing this, I'm doing this. But really what I'm doing is I'm just closing the back of the heart and even like the base of the heart as I push my heart forward. Alternatively, I feel for the way that my spiraling heart, because a heart also, like if you watch a heart beat, it also has this sort of dance, spiraling dance to it. how it rests in the center of my body. And now I explore what it feels like to move with that awareness. I don't want to push my heart forward. I can still do the deepest back bends, right? I can, if I wanted to, I have, right? So I know it's possible. You can still do the deepest back bends, and actually what you find is more space. You can go, I find that I can go far deeper in that space. But more importantly, I'm doing it from a place of integration, openness, sort of awe. And those just inherently counteract the rigidity that these systems require. It doesn't mean that we can't have situations where we sort of fragment ourselves and I go to my yoga class and I'm having this amazing experience, and then I go outside of the yoga studio and I walk past the homeless person on the street, right? That is definitely something that happens,
Yeah.
right? If I'm being perfectly honest, it's happened, I've done it. So it's not to say that we still can't fragment, but I feel like that's where the practice comes in, is in practicing how to stay in the wholeness more and more, so that it's not just here's how I am in yoga class and here's how I am at work and here's how I am in my with my family and here's how I am over here and here's how I am over here. That those, instead of becoming fragmented parts, they become facets, right? I have become a multifaceted person. And that, over, the last decades of exploring the relationship of that, I find that it's just, there's a place for me to go that's not the cultural framework that I've been raised into as a white woman, right? Which is the normalization of white culture. Now there's someplace else for me to go that's a full embodiment of self and other. And there's a framework for me to sort of peel back the layers of what is it like, whiteness, uh, what I found, it's less so now, but especially 20 years ago when I was first starting to think through this, whiteness was, it wasn't talked about in the same sort of way, especially amongst white people. It wasn't talked about in the
Right.
same kind of way. So there wasn't as much of an awareness of how it's a pattern, how there's actually patterns to it. There was definitely an awareness of that in non-white communities. And that's where I was getting schooled from, right?
Right.
Was in with Black and Indigenous folks being like, this is how white people do stuff. But in finding language for how patterns, it's not that we can't just be like, okay, well, that pattern's wrong now. And then what? Right?
Mhm.
Here's this other option. It's not just about dismantling this, it's about building this. So that's where this has been so formative and informative for me, because it gives me this rich, open space in which and where I want to be, so that that over there doesn't look appealing at all, whether that's in how I move my body or how I move through the world.
Mm. I love how you said it allows us to stay in the wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is not easy.
Not
I
at
don't
all.
find it easy
No.
personally.
But with practice, it becomes more of a habit. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of it, I think. And the gift of it is that little by little, it weaves into your life more and more. And so that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And for me, recognizing that I get to be faceted doesn't rather than fragmented.
Hmm.
So, I don't have to show up in the same way. Like the way that I am with my closest friends when we're just, hanging out is different than the way that I am when I'm showing up to, in my professional capacity. Of course it is, but it's not fragmented off. And so therefore there's a little bit of each in both, right?
Hmm.
There's the way I show up professionally. I'm not a very like buttoned up and stiff and like, I'm to crack jokes and be silly, but then
Hmm.
also my friendships are all like the people I'm closest with are the ones that want to talk about real stuff.
Exactly.
So, and that's just one example of how when it's facets, when we're thinking of ourselves as faceted rather than fragmented, now every part of us gets to be in conversation with all the other parts of us, rather than this is who I am over in here, and now I change my clothes, I change my activity, and I change who I am is over here, right?
It's fascinating because when I was a kid, I read The Social Me. I think it was
Oh,
Francis
another one.
Bacon. And it
Okay.
talks about this, but also in a very fragmented way because that was long before embodiment I mean, it was when the patriarchy kind of removed embodiment from the conversation. And so as we're coming back home, and that idea, the word anchor feels so resonant, because it's in that anchoring that we can like begin to mend those parts of ourselves, or to reintegrate things that we've completely separated or fragmented. And I love the use of the word faceted, because we are like a jewel. And that there are
Yeah.
many sides of us, but each one just reveals a greater whole, rather than, you know, this interrupted, segmented
Yeah.
living. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, what does it mean to for you to hold a space like Anchor? And yeah,
Oh gosh, I love Anchor so much.
yes.
So I'll just give a bit of a framework for what it is. So Anchor Community, I started it back. I started teaching Anchor courses back, I think, in 2018, but I would do them just sort of in the, as was the mode back then, like as was the trend. They were like 6-week classes or 21-day classes or something like that. And it was to explore exactly what I'm talking about, that this is a way of um, not centering these systems that we want to dismantle, so that we're not just putting our focus onto them and sort of holding our focus there, which has its time and place, but also can't be the only way we do it, but is a way of being in the body as antithetical to like the way that we are embodied, to be so embodied that the violence of whiteness, patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, etc., can't live here,
Mm.
right? To be that present in our body, that those violences have no space. And then I realized that I didn't want to just have this like kind of start and stop to. I wanted it to be a place where we could just really be in community together. So I was teaching it, I was holding it as twice monthly classes, starting in 2019. Then COVID happened, and I was like, oh well, I need to have it be every week. I need that anchor every week. So since 2020, we've been meeting every week. We meet on Wednesday evenings, and then actually, I don't know when this is going to air, but starting on May 2nd, I'm adding another session every week. I mean, really, once 2025 started, I was like, okay, I think we need to meet twice a week. So. So we're going to meet on Wednesday evenings, East Coast time, 7 to 8 p.m., and then Friday afternoons, noon to 1, partly to help more time zones be able to join us. And also parents were saying that that might be easier in some ways. But Anchor is this, it's a space where we come together to practice. Um, the Wednesday classes have been very introspective, not and rarely, if ever, is there much movement. The Friday classes are going to start bringing in a little bit more movement, because I just feel like there's some good stuff there. But we go deep together into this realm of, you know, deeply radical embodied presence that holds all that we're holding without giving it the weight of the center of our attention. And it has just been this, I personally don't know how I could have gotten through the last 5 years without it. Like I need anchor. And then I hear from people who've been a part of it that it feels the same way. Whether they've been there for the whole time or just, a few months or a couple years, or some people come back and forth, they come in and they go out. That's the beauty of it being an ongoing space, is that people can do that. It's not like a course where you have to kind of like, if you miss a class, you feel like you've now like
Right.
you're behind, and or I want to do it, but I have to wait till the next one starts. So you can just come in. And you know, I think about how, I started teaching somatics online back in 20, I think it was like 2013. I
Yeah.
was doing it through Skype with with the drop connections and the like like all
Yeah.
that, the whole thing. Um, and then I started using Zoom, and I had to explain to people what Zoom was, and convince them that it was worth downloading, et cetera, et cetera. And then 2020 happened, and all of a sudden we were like, here we are. And
Mhm.
there's aspects that I really miss to the ease of, I'm not currently not teaching regularly in person anywhere. Maybe that'll change, but right now I'm not. And I miss that. And at the same time, I just love how accessible it is. Like I have folks in Anchor who can't leave their house and they come to Anchor, right? And I get to work with people all over the world. And if I had people doubted me being able to teach somatics when I first started, they thought it was weird, they thought it could never work, and I struggled with not believing them.
Yeah.
But now that I've been doing it for so long, I'm like, oh, it absolutely works. It's so clear how well it works.
It's beautiful.
I it is, it's beautiful, right? And I'm not sure how it happens, but there's something that happens where I mean, I guess it just kind of points to the non-linearity of time and space.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
just sounds super woo about it, but at the same time, quantum physics about it, where it's like we can be in relationship across time and space. Somehow it works.
Literally, you can be teaching to someone in Sri Lanka who's half a day ahead.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
so
The time doesn't
incredible.
matter. Yeah,
No,
it's really amazing.
and there's something
Yeah,
really sweet about the safety of someone being in their own space. They can turn their
it's
camera
true.
off. They can,
Mm-hmm.
really explore without the worry of someone watching them, or if they
Yeah.
choose to have their camera off, or like looking at the room around you and thinking, I should look like that. Like it's just, there
Mm-hmm.
is a really sweet element to teaching somatics to someone in their own space.
It's true. Yeah, you can, and also like not only video, but also sound. So if they want to make certain
Yes.
noises, I personally am not the kind, like some people have no trouble making sound in a group space, and that's not me. That's never been me. So I find it, helpful for that. And yeah, to be home,
Mm,
there's there's so much beauty to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a gift. It,
Mm-hmm.
the book is a gift, your work is a gift. When I read from the book, I have two favorite pieces, but
Mm.
I would love to, I'll share them, but I would love to know your favorite part, if
Oh,
you have a
okay. I'll
favorite part.
try.
So I think two of my absolute favorite is the relationship between the lungs and the diaphragm and the pericardium. That
Yeah.
passage has brought tears to my eyes. It has brought comfort to me and to so many people. Like, I can't even tell you. People are always just in awe from that passage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the mesentery.
Yeah. Who doesn't love the mesentery?
I didn't
Um,
even know what a mesentery was.
I know most people don't. I will say to listeners, North Atlantic graciously my publisher, let me share that chapter of the part in the pericardium as the link is on my Instagram, but I can maybe after this I'll go make sure that it's really obvious in case we want to go find it.
We can put it in the
So
show notes too.
oh,
Yeah,
great. Yeah, let's put in the show notes.
yeah, absolutely.
Because then you can listen to that whole chapter. It's called For When the Heart is Breaking. And it's definitely one of my favorite ones because it is, and it just feels really so essential, especially right now, obviously.
Yes.
It felt essential when I wrote it, and it feels essential now. So the mesentery, it is a part of the body that most people don't know about
Mhm.
because it was only classified as an organ back in 2016. Before that, it was considered just a collection of mesenteries, which were just connective tissue. But really, one of the most amazing things about the mesentery, and there's a lot, so we could fill up, several podcast episodes, which is why I gave it a whole chapter of its own, so you can go find it. But the mesentery is the embryological origin of all the belly organs. So your liver, your stomach, your pancreas, your spleen, your intestines, they all developed from the mesentery like flower buds on a stalk. And now the mesentery holds all of the belly organs in what's called systemic continuity. That's the scientific term, but as an embodied poet, I get to say that we can think of that like it holds the belly organs in community. So there's a motility to it. So it's not mobile. It doesn't move through the body, but it can direct more lymph or nerve activity to the belly organs as is needed. Say if there's an infection or if you've just been eating or whatever it is. The mesentery has this sort of it's sort of, it's the not to I don't know, gender roles and etc. But it's like the mom organ. It's
Yes.
like it kind of keeps everything together. And then there is like a certain like mother, or at least like, the body that grew you in the womb quality to it because all the organs came out of the mesentery. So there's a very like rich Um, one person in Anchor used to call it their cuddle organ. Really cute.
So
And
cute.
it is like, it's soft, it's made mostly of fat. One of the reasons it wasn't recognized as an organ until technology improved to be able to see it in the body is that when it would get dissected from the body, it would lose its shape because it doesn't have the same, like, you take the liver out of the body, it's obvious a liver. The mesentery would sort of like just flop into the bowl. Once they were able to use medical imagery to see it in 3D in the body, then you can really see its shape and it spirals. It's
Wow.
so beautiful. Google mesentery and you'll see there's like it has this like sporadic. I think it looks like a thundercloud before it rains in the summer. Like it's just like so beautiful. And yeah, it wasn't understood. And so I do take some, certainly poetic license there. The chapter is called The Queer Theory of the Mesentery because I'm looking at how, okay, this very large organ, because it's the length of, it's about, if you were to stretch it out, it would be about 6 feet tall. So this very significant organ in the very center of us wasn't recognized for quite a long time, which not only we can now get some interesting information about the body based on what science has been able to recognize, but we can also get some information on why it is that maybe that science wasn't able to see it. This is where I try and tread really carefully because I don't, especially since there's so much of an anti-science um, bend towards everything, especially now.
Yeah.
But I remember telling somebody about the mesentery once and how it wasn't understood as an organ until 2016. And their response was like, yeah, why weren't they telling us? And I was like, no, they weren't. It wasn't that they weren't telling us. It was that they didn't know.
Mhm.
Science isn't, rarely is science trying to hide stuff from us unless there's like a political angle or a corporate angle. For the most part, science is always trying to understand and then share the understandings. But why is it that we weren't able, what does it show us that we weren't able to see the connections, that we were so focused on the parts that we weren't able to see the connections? That's something that's kind of well understood within the Western medicine world is that there's a risk of being so focused on your own, specialty that you miss the connective whole. And I think that's an important thing to hold as people who, I mean, I'm not a surgeon or a medical biologist. I just love anatomy books. But in thinking, I personally think that we can either have a somatic worldview or an anatomical worldview. A somatic worldview is always looking at the whole. An anatomical worldview, it's not just about looking at like liver versus kidneys, it's looking at parts.
Mhm.
The best scientists that I know, who I got to research, I got to interview some as I wrote the book, they have a somatic worldview even as they are deep in an anatomical field. They understand that not only the whole of the body, but the whole of the context that the person is living in is going to have an effect on their specialty,
Yeah.
right? And I also know people in the wellness industry that have an anatomical worldview where it's
Mhm.
just all about parts and pieces and it's always about the nervous system. Have you noticed? It's always about the nervous system. It's just like that's not the whole body.
Right.
That's not it. Now it's
Buzzwords right
always
now.
about like it's about cortisol. It's about like, it's about this, it's about that. It's about it's just like it's always about like these ever smaller parts rather than like but what's the whole experience, right? So it's not that I'm not trying to say like it's like these types of people versus that types of people. I'm saying it's an approach to understanding. Um, yeah. So the mesentery, I feel, offers some pretty interesting insights into how we can have a more somatic worldview because it was unrecognized until only recently.
Phenomenal. So, as the interstitium,
Mm-hmm.
how
Yeah.
fascia just became an organ, but yeah, really interesting that
Really interesting stuff.
some of the broadest, most connective parts that create cohesion were ignored or seen as
Yeah.
unimportant. So, really
Yeah.
fascinating. And I love the shift because in that shift, there's so much context and layers that you can really begin to explore.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would love, you shared a little bit about writing the book, but would you share a little more about the process of it and how that,
Mm.
yes.
Yeah. I'm currently in the process of writing a deck, an oracle deck. Well, it's not so much an oracle deck, it's more like a conversation deck called right now it's called The Body Oracle, but the title might change.
I have that. Oh, good. I'm
Yeah,
excited
yeah,
for
The
the
Body
new. Yes.
Oracle I made as I was writing the book, and then my publisher, North Atlantic, asked if we could expand it and create sort of a deck companion to Returning Home to Our Bodies.
Right.
So this writing experience feels really different than the writing experience for the book. I think partly it's just a different project, and the book is alive now. But for the writers out there, I will say that writing a book is a very my publisher would sometimes just reach out and be like, "How are the existential crises going?" And I was like, "How do you know?" And he was like, "Because that's just what happens." Like, and then there was one time he took me out to lunch and he was like, "Well, when this person was writing their book, this is how they put it, and then this person was writing their book, this is how they described it." And he kind of gave this list of these really amazing writers talking about how hard it was, and I was like, "Oh, okay, so this isn't just that I can't do it and that's why it's hard. It's just that this is hard, right?" Writing a book is an incredibly, um, it's very personal, even if it's something that's about something that's not that personal. I think it's in a personal process, and yeah, it's quite a it's quite a challenging process. So, but my that returning home to our bodies, I was using pieces that I had written, maybe 10 years ago as jumping off points and then finding ways for it to all come together. And really once the first draft was written, I remember my friend invited me out to his Airbnb like corporate apartment in Boston, one of those places that's only gray, you know what I'm talking about?
Mm.
Which is exactly what I needed to
Oh,
lay my whole manuscript out all over the apartment because there was nothing to distract me. There was no even colors to like distract me. It was a really weird space. But then I was able to see what the book really wanted to say. I think that for whatever creative project that we're in, whether, because I know that people who listen to your podcast are creative in all sorts of different ways. And parenting, I also think, is a creative process for sure. And so the work is in listening to what the project wants, right? Like whether that project is a book or a child. I don't want to say a child is a project, but the project of child raising, right?
mhm.
If we go in just with our ideas about what needs to happen and try and impose that upon,
Right.
then we're not actually listening to what's there. And I think that to tie back into what I was saying before, that I'm seeing really well-intentioned people within the realm of somatics offering what they think the body is saying, but it feels like there's an imposition of there's like almost like an anthropomorphizing. I hope I
Yes.
said that right. Of the body saying like, oh, well, this is what your kidneys would say to you. This is what your ribs would say to you. I appreciate it. And it feels like an imposition rather than an invitation into feeling. What does it feel like to realize that you don't have a rib cage? Patty calls it the thoracic cathedral.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that so beautiful?
Mm.
But it's like it is this incredible expanding, and just there's 126 joints in that area of your body. We call it a rib cage. I don't need to have my ribs, I don't need someone to tell me this is what your ribs are going to say to you. I instead I need to just be reminded that, well, for me it's a reminding, but for other folks it's like, it's a learning that I don't want to, that sounded dismissive. When we're just learning it, we're
Yeah.
learning it, right? And then 20 years in, I still need people to remind me that I have a thoracic cathedral that expands like that with every breath. We need each other to help remember. So it's not so much that the ribs are now, I'm now like, oh, my ribs want to tell me this or that. It's that I can take my consciousness to the ribs, which have their own sort of conscious form, and then see what's there. Let's see what's there. And that is just so different. And so, in a similar kind of way, I'm talking in tangents, which I often do. Writing the book was very much like first I had to, I was trying to just like write the book. I just want to write the book and I'm going to make it say this. And then it had to become this process of deep, deep listening through all of my own fears about what it
Mm.
would mean to have a published book out in the world. As much as I wanted to do it, I think sometimes the things we want the most are the scariest. I was really scared.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, and I was on another podcast with a friend right around like the 3 month mark after it came out. And we got to talking about how it kind of felt a little bit sort of, no, that was a 6 month mark. And I remembered how 3 months after the book baby was born, I started to really feel like I had the flow. And she's a mom, and she's like, yeah, that's kind of how it was with my kids. Like, so it's just like to kind of get into this rhythm of like, oh, right, I'm a different person now. That person over there that wrote the book is now living a different life because they've had the book, right?
Mm.
So there's a lot more I could say for sure. And I do love talking to people about their creative processes. So my email is easy to find on my website, and you're welcome to reach out and ask. But it's such a formative process to create something. Like you just really aren't going to be the same person after as you are when you start.
That's what I was wondering, if there's like a liminality in that creative space, as
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
just
there
kind of,
absolutely is.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now the book lives out there forever, and
Yeah,
what
it
an
sure does.
incredible thing. It's really,
I know. It gets to have its own little life, which is really,
yes.
that's why, I don't have children. I have godchildren, but I don't have children. But it has felt like I've gotten to live this sort of parallel sort of experience, just
Yeah,
because, like, my book is out there having its own life with its own people, and I can't,
it's amazing.
it's not for me to decide who buys it and what they do with it and all that stuff. It's just like, but here I am. If you want to ask questions, like, you can come find me. But um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's quite a
there's
quite a
legacy
process.
here. It's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm really, really happy for you and proud of you and
Thank you.
grateful for it.
Thanks so much. I'm so
Yeah,
happy that it resonates with you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, would you share if you have a favorite ritual for dropping back into your body?
Oh, that's such a good question. My favorite is always gravity,
Mm,
and remembering that gravity is a relationship. And I mentioned it briefly at the beginning, or as we were talking at the beginning, but gravity is not just a downward pull. There's also, um, in Newtonian physics, it's called the normal force, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. But so my body's sitting on this chair, the chair is pushing back up into my body with the same amount of force as my body is pushing into the chair. And that's why I can sit here held in space like this. It's not, I could, if my body overpowered the chair would break. But that's how I'm able to be here. And the earth is pushing back up on the structure of the house with the same amount of force. That's why the house can be here. But those are all like sort of mechanistic, object-oriented ideas around it. Going back to that idea of the fluidity of gravity, recognizing that as I am here on Earth, the fluids in my body are being drawn down. The whole of my body, because the whole of my body is fluid, is being drawn down in this sort of spiraling pull. And simultaneously, the Earth is pushing back up into me in this mirroring, um, or I don't know if mirroring is the right word, but in this relational push for the pull. So I'm pulled down and I'm pushed up in equal measure. If it were only a pull down, then we wouldn't have this dimension to ourselves. I wouldn't be able to, make shapes with my body. But there is a pull down and a push back up. So being grounded to me is returning to that relationship, right? And everything else is possible from within that relationship. I don't have to stay in a calm and measured tone. I don't have to, like, have only calm and measured experiences. I can be exuberant. I can feel rage or grief and still have that grounded quality to whatever it is that I'm feeling. And it then gives ground also for, the challenging just like what it means to be alive. There's always challenge, right? There's always grief and heartbreak and loss and conflict and, from the micro level to the macro level. And there's change, right?
Mm.
There's just like it's not like we live in this static plastic planet. There's always this flow of change happening, but if I can be in that flow of gravity, then the change doesn't need to there's an anchor to it. I guess that's the like
Mm.
a reason I use the word anchor. But yeah, that's where I always start when I'm teaching other people and when I'm starting my own practice. It's just to feel how I am in that relationship with the earth and let my attention go there. Attention changes things. So if I give my attention to that, my body's going to shift, my breath is going to shift, my mind is going to shift, everything's going to shift because I've now given my attention to that relationship of body and earth.
Incredible. I love a lot the way that the work that you offer is so invitational because
Mm,
how many people come into this field of exploring their bodies with a lot of somatic dominance kind of being doled out of,
mm,
as you mentioned a little bit, but like feel this,
mm-hmm.
understand this, know this is what your body's saying, all of that other outside telling us what's
Yeah.
inside. And so this is this shift into invitational language and exploration and curiosity and psychoeducation, but then follow that with your own, fluidity and organic
Yeah.
means of exploring it is just so beautiful. And I think it's kind of the answer to our separateness
Mm,
because it's in our wholeness that we find deeper connection with others.
yeah.
And I sensed that happening in Anchor the times that I've had the privilege of attending, just like there's a real community there that feels so safe and there's community agreements and that honoring of the individual but also of the collective. So
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Yeah, and I encourage listeners to go check it out if you can. And
Yeah, I'd love
out of the
that.
book too, and you have a Substack,
I
right?
do. I have a
Yeah.
Substack with a very like only a few posts are ever paywalled. I'm trying to keep it like mostly open. I have a pretty solid. I mostly share memes on Instagram. I share like I'm just trying to not share too much of my original thinking on those apps.
Right.
And sometimes I can't resist, like when my dog finds a deer femur. So you can find me there. And like my website is my name and my email is info@abigailroseclarke.com. So I try and make myself pretty accessible on the internet. So please do reach out with questions or, I love getting to hear from people about what the book has meant to them if they read it. And also if they have questions, that helps me as a writer to hear what people have to say. And I do plan on having at least one online sort of book club for the book, but if people are interested, I also last summer I led a course with advaya.com that's a 6 week guided sort of guided course on returning home to our bodies. It follows the structure of the book. So if people are wanting sort of guidance on the book as they read it, you can go to advaya.com and it's available as an on-demand course.
Phenomenal. I'll put everything
Yeah.
in the show notes.
Thank
And
you. Yeah.
yeah, it's such an honor to have you here. It's a
Yeah, thank you so
pleasure to get to
much.
talk with you. It's been a
I
long
know, it's
time.
been so long. I know. And I just saw our friend Danielle just the last
Yes,
week. Yeah.
yes, her
From the same
birthday.
training.
I
Yeah, for
saw.
her birthday.
Yeah, what a great training that was. What an incredible group of
I
people. I
know,
mean,
a
oh my
real game
goodness.
changing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you would leave our listeners with one offering or an invitation as they deepen their exploration of somatics or anchoring, what would it be?
Hmm. There, as an invitation, the the idea, like, and I invite you to consider with me, because this is definitely something that I think about as well. What does it mean to not need to fix anything or improve anything? That we're not doing this to fix or improve ourselves or our lives or go out and get a certain thing, but that deepening presence is just, it's not even the goal. It just, that's what we're doing, right? No, no need to fix or strive or change. We will change. And by being in presence, we'll change in a way that's different than if we weren't. But there's no need to fix or improve. It's a radical difference, radical difference. And that is definitely something that Patty Townsend has given me. So I give it to you, who also has a Substack and is really worth following for sure.
Yes, yes, yes. What a beautiful offering and invitation. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Abigail.
Yeah, thank you, Jeanette. This is
Yes.
lovely. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you if you're listening. Please definitely follow up if this has resonated with you because there's so much treasure here with Abigail's work. And I can't wait to see what unfolds with your next published offering of
Yeah. The
oh,
body.
the Body Oracle, but you have a Somatic Tarot
Oh
too.
yeah, that's right. That is coming out for another small edition soon. It's currently listed on my website if you wanted to go and get it. I'm waiting for the for things to come from the printers, and then it'll go out. But I only print like I think there's gonna be 150 in this edition. I do small editions.
Mm.
They do sell out rather quickly, but there's a wait list if you're listening to this and it happened to have sold out. But it's a tarot deck that is based, I've changed it from pentacles, wands, swords, and cups to earth, air, water, fire. And then, yeah, it was back in also in 2018. I got this idea. It just wouldn't let me stop. It wouldn't let me sleep. I would wake up and it would be like, make a tarot deck, call it the Somatic Tarot. And so I just started working on it, and it's now been out. It sells out of every edition that it makes because they're so small. And it's been going out all over the world now for, what is it? Is it 6 years now? How long is
Yes.
2018? It was a long time ago now. So
2017. I think I've gotten them as gifts for people. I have a deck.
yeah. Yeah, thank
It's
you. I love
gorgeous.
it's
Yeah.
such a sweet. I love getting to share it. So, and one thing that I'm doing this time too, I ordered extra copies of the book, which are sized the same size now as the tarot cards. So, because indie decks, independently published decks, are more expensive than mass-produced decks, and that's just not something that everyone can always afford. So, the book, if you have a tarot deck that you love or just a tarot deck that you got somewhere, you could use this book, which has a more somatic, radical lens to it, and use the cards that you have. So, that's also on my website.
Very cool. Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. I love my deck.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that you love it. That's
All
so
of your
great.
work. Lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I hope to see you
Yeah, me too.
again
Yeah.
and soon. Yeah, it was a treasure to talk to you. And
Yeah.
I'll say goodbye for now.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Okay. So.
I can ask Patty if